As James said, this was titled as Conversations about Governance, so let's talk about governance. What is governance? If you'd like to put something in the chat before we get started, just to level set, I'd like to know what your thoughts are about governance. What does governance mean to you? Any thoughts about governance in the context of tech comms and content, Cecily, standards, like official ones like ISO, processes, working within parameters, ensures consistency. Thank you, Russell. Mari, processes and the ways we have to prove we follow them. Excellent, great answers. How to run a tech hubs department. Excellent. Certain guidelines that a company follows. Yes, yes. All right, all great answers. So, like I said earlier, it's never too early, but also never too late to talk about governance. About a month ago, I'm getting ready to go to bed and I get a text from a friend who asked that question. If I say governance to you, does it mean anything? And so I had that moment, that first thought of, do I want this to be a long conversation, a short one, or one that happens tomorrow? And I couldn't help myself. I just answered. And the next question was, what is the quickest way I can learn some basics? What does governance have to do with content? So I gave him the article that I wrote for ISTC last winter, and hopefully, hope for the best that we could be done with it. But also explained that governance is your rules of the road. It's the roles, responsibilities, your standards, your processes, but it's also documenting and implementing all of this so that people know what to do and not to get in each other's way. So this brought on more conversation. The question of policies over content, little unsure about that. And so I told one of my favorite stories. It's one of my favorite examples of content and governance. There was a story, a team that I worked with that managed content requests through a help desk system. They, that's how people submitted requests for new pages, new content, content updates. And it set up this perpetual struggle between the content manager and the IT manager. So we had one manager leading a team responsible for content quality on the website, and the other was all about quantity. How many tickets could his team close in a day, a week, a month? So you can see where I'm going here. He could see where I was going. Where do you think I was going? What do you think the point was that I wanted him to get to with this? Any thoughts that you want to add in the chat, or maybe come off mic and discuss this? Yes. Governance, otherwise it's the Wild West. Definitely about communication. Clear processes help to avoid conflict. It's better to prevent tickets. Yes, definitely, Graham. It's better to, yes, the idea of using the help desk to take in content requests, yes, not exactly the best scenario at all. So, yeah. So definitely all of these were very valid points. And yes, let's avoid tickets in the first place. So benefits about, there are a lot of benefits to having a governance framework in place. We can use it to set expectations. We can use it to identify and clarify roles. Once we have it in place, it can help us to increase efficiency and productivity. Defining roles and responsibilities helps people understand what's expected of them and also what's expected of the people they work with. And there have been studies that show that employees who know what their roles are and what their team members' roles are, and when they have that communication, they are more efficient and they are more productive because there isn't that ambiguity. Governance identifies our processes with the inputs and the outputs and the handoffs, so you know exactly what it is you're supposed to do. It improves communication. It helps us to establish metrics and goals. So, you know, yes, the IT department would know how many tickets they are supposed to close, but they would know what those tickets are. And those tickets shouldn't be content tickets. And it helps achieve compliance and minimize risk. So we know that we're doing things the right way and not, you know, not setting the company up for, you know, legal and, you know, perhaps damage to the reputation and legal issues. So if we've got a, you know, a web developer who's going rogue and developing web pages and just publishing them without optimizing them for content or for SEO, without sending them through brand reviews or legal reviews, and now we can take that out of his hands and leave it with the content team, we're definitely helping to achieve compliance with our review process and minimize risk that he's going to write something or miss something that puts the company in danger. All right, so when it comes to governance, where do I start? You know, that explaining all of this leads to the next question of where do I start? And it's easy for all of us, whether it's somebody who's new to the topic or even for those of us who are a little more experienced, to think, I'll just look on Google for a template. There must be keywords. I can just start searching. But it's always good to ask why. What are you being asked to do? Why are you needing to do this? And what I found is whatever the situation, whether it's me just starting a project or me working with a team or a customer, I'd like to start with the basics and those just foundational questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how. Those are really good brainstorming questions, either for yourself or for a group, to figure out what it is you're trying to do and why. So you can start, especially with governance, thinking about things like with who, like what are the role, who's working on the content? What are their roles? What are they doing with content? What do the roles do? What do they produce? What are the goals of that content? What is the purpose? When are these roles involved? When is the output needed? When is the input needed? When are they publishing the content? Where are they publishing the content? Where are the results found? Where in the process are the handoffs? Where are the inputs needed? Where are the outputs needed? Why? Why are these tasks even, why is the content even needed? Why are these roles doing these tasks at these times? You know, can we look for efficiencies? How are the tasks completed? How are the results measured? If we can start asking those questions, then we can start looking at forming a RACI chart, which will get you to the people that you need to have involved in the processes. And a RACI chart is a really useful tool for getting started in building that foundation of governance. Now, a RACI chart it's new to some people, it's embedded in other organizations as a means of defining tasks, setting expectations, organizing roles, and really helping to streamline decision making so that the right people are making the decisions at the right level. So it also helps to remove politics from projects because it identifies who those owners are, who are the decision makers, and what are the escalation points. So when we look at a RACI chart, we can think about the R stands for responsible. Who does the work? Who is responsible for completing the work? Accountable, for the A, is who approves the work. Consulted tells us who is asked for input or feedback. And informed is simply who needs to be told about the work. And where this gets really helpful is there is definitely a difference between who is doing the work and who is being asked for input or feedback. Because sometimes the people who are asked for input or feedback really want to be doing the work, but we don't need them to do the work. Sometimes the people who just need to be told about the work really want to help do the work. Sometimes the manager who approves the work really wants to be part of doing the work. So when you identify these different roles that are responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, and the team is all informed, or the different departments are informed, and this is communicated out, there's clarity. You're setting the expectations, you're clarifying the roles, and who is actually doing what. Any questions about RACI charts, defining what these might look like? Has anybody used them? We can always come back and talk about them as well.
I'll jump in because I haven't used a RACI chart before, but I'm interested in you talked about it removes the politics, and I can kind of see that potentially that's because actually you have to address some of that politics in order to put it together. Because people have to agree that yes, I am an informed category, not a responsible category, and so on. So there might be perhaps some negotiation, or somebody in authority has to state some of this. Like how might that process actually work of getting people to agree their positions?
That's a great question. There's the team that I'm working with now workshopped through, because the company had gone through just a bit of restructuring with some of the teams, and because responsibilities had shifted and had split from not only one team to another, but teams had moved to different departments. The things look wildly different in terms of who was managing what, and responsibilities or tasks that had moved from one team to another and had literally moved from one department back to another were still being performed by former teams. So it really was, I mean, to borrow Russell's phrase, it was the Wild West. So the teams, to prepare for a workshop, we literally did a workshop with this, and people created a shared spreadsheet that just listed, in the days leading up to this workshop, that listed everything they thought they were responsible for. And it was probably a workshop that took place for over the course of 3 or 4 sessions for about an hour each session. But it was, like you said, it was negotiations. It was discussion, it was negotiations. In some cases, tasks were consolidated because people were putting in, what they viewed as their territory. In some cases, tasks were split up because people had, seen entire functions of a department as their responsibility, but they actually had to be teased out into individual items. But after those 3 or 4 working sessions, we came up with a RACI chart that was very clear in terms of this team, in terms of where each team fit into managing the entire website and digital ecosystem for the organization. And what had begun as a workshop between three teams ended up as a RACI chart that addressed um, the contributions or participation of probably 6 or 7.
Right.
So because people recognized, we got to areas where people were like, well, I don't do that. Well, I don't do that either. Well, I don't do that either. And people are like, well, I just want to be informed. I don't want to be responsible for that. So it was, yes, it removed the politics, but yes, it opened up people to realizing I have so much going on here. I'm fine with just being informed, and I'm fine with just being, consulted. I don't need to have my team involved in that. And so people really the discussions were very productive in that sense, with people learning to be okay with letting go of some things.
So the workshop approach actually helped to get people to realize that they didn't necessarily want to be completely in control of everything, because actually there was a lot involved, and they could allow that to be, say, delegated to other teams, and that meant that their works and roles and responsibilities were much more manageable and in line with what they were focused on, by the sounds of it.
Yes, very much so. We did it on a team by team basis in that respect. Within teams themselves or within smaller groups, we did a cross-functional team when it just came to, say, managing the content operation process, and we did it by role instead of job title, because job titles are an HR function. Within role, we could simply address things by copywriter, reviewer, copy editor, content publisher, legal, and that workflow process, or content strategist, that in terms of defining the RACI chart that way, you don't know who's going to be playing a copywriter one day and a copy editor the next day. So that allows you to look at things from that role perspective, as opposed to locking people in by job title. And that's a really helpful way to look at RACI charts as well.
Yeah, and I can see Mary there's talked about the setting the expectations at the start of the project, because you're having that discussion and that understanding about what's involved and who's going to be actually responsible for each part, which is really, really useful.
Right. And typically, and I wish I had put a more completed one on here, typically you have one person who is accountable, and then as long as one person is accountable for the task, then, or the area, then whether you have one person who's responsible and any number who are consulted are informed, then that's how you look at it. That way is up to you. But typically you have one person, you should have at least one person who is accountable, who's going to approve the work, and at least one person who is doing the work. If you don't have at least one A and one R, then you should be looking at whether you need that task at all.
Oh, interesting. Because my initial thought was that you were going to say you need to find somebody for that role, and actually no. It's if you don't have people kind of going, yes, this is I'm accountable because this needs to happen. You might not need to do it at all, which is
right.
a different thought process entirely. Yeah.
Oh, you could do probably a whole session or a whole workshop on RACI charts, because there are different ways to look at them. I've seen people do them with the RACI across the top and the tasks going in the boxes. I prefer to do like the roles across the top and the tasks down the side and the R's and the A's in the body of the table. But it's a very thought-provoking and productive exercise, but it's well worth the investment.
It reminds me of something that was termed as stakeholder analysis in
Yes.
place, and it's that same idea, but this actually gives it a really nice, clear structure within that, which is really helpful. So I appreciate you sharing this. It's a new one to me, and it looks like it's people have seen similar things, but not necessarily used this language around it, which is really useful. So thank you.
So, yeah. So just a little more about this. Like I had said, if you had no A's, you might want to redefine it. When it comes to the R's, if you had a task that had no R's, you would wonder, why is nobody assigned to complete the task? On the other hand, if you had too many R's, multiple R's across, then you have a sign that too many people are assigned to do this, and you basically have like too many cooks in the kitchen. So your corrective action might be to reassign a responsible source or several of those responsible sources as consulted or informed. You might want to, reevaluate what are those roles, why are those roles being held responsible, and, reassign them to something else. Are they really appropriate for that? So I've seen some RACI charts that had customers, depending on what role the customers play, especially like you said with stakeholder charts. Some organizations see customers having a very heavy investment in their experience research and design, or like a customer council who provides feedback or helps with reviews. So customers might actually show up on the RACI chart sometimes. So when we have we can work on a RACI chart, but there are other things you can add to a framework, a governance framework. So, and you can make your governance framework as, as robust or as simple as you need it to be. When I asked earlier about, what you think goes into governance, a lot of these things were mentioned: standards, processes, policies, things like that. Anything that's going to help define how people do their work, the roles and responsibilities, formalized processes, standards, things that I've seen put into a framework that just help formalize this so that people know that, formalize the guidance, are things like the content types. What do we publish and the purpose of each of them? Form integration and usage, like what kinds of forms do we use and how do we use them? What is our policy for them? Who's allowed to incorporate them? What's the brand of the form, the application? When and where do we use them? In addition to content type, we have page content and structure with our required and optional elements. If we're publishing on the web, how do we handle redirects and vanity URLs? That might seem an IT thing, but if we're publishing content, then we probably should need some content guidance around that. Like I mentioned, roles and responsibilities. Publishing on the web, we probably need some SEO guidelines. We always have a style guide, I hope, that addresses voice and tone. Our standards for taxonomy and term sets, and then our workflow, our operations in terms of content planning, creation, and publishing. And then just some content-specific policies might be set around accessibility, brand reviews and approvals, legal reviews and approvals, our content retention and disposition. How long are we going to keep something? And then at what point are we going to retire or archive our content? and then user management and training, depending on, what you're publishing and how and when, who's responsible for training your users of your platform, and who's going to manage them, and what permissions do they have, and so forth to your content. So in the late night conversation that seemed to never end, we had the push for, I still want a template or example. And the thing is that you can find a template, you can find examples for how to do governance out on the internet. But the fact is, every company ends up doing it their own way. You brainstorm, you think about what topics that you need. You think about how your own company is doing it, how your own team or department is doing it. And whatever you come up with is going to be unique to your situation, and it may or may not align with any template or example that you find. Or the template or example that you find may steer you down the wrong road of what you want to do in your group. So, like I said, there are, it's best to work with the people that or talk to the people that you're working with if you want to either build or rework or, formalize what you have into a governance plan, and workshop it. I've sat in workshops, I've led meetings where, people will just talk and talk and talk, which is great. You can, workshop it and have other people do the work and talk with it and capture their notes. If you're leading a meeting where people don't want to talk, sometimes the best way is to just start talking and encourage them to, add on to what you're saying, or, at some point they'll start telling you what you're doing wrong. It's either way, you can't go wrong in a workshop setting. People feel more comfortable, I find, talking about these sorts of things when they're all encouraged to participate. So, and then last, when I've read books on governance and content books that include things on governance and articles, but my favorite, this really captures what I think about when I think about governance. It's more than following the steps prescribed by a workflow diagram. It's more than just reading the policies and the processes. It really extends to everybody who participates in or with our content operations. It extends to being mindful of the content in front of us and taking care of it in accordance with that entire governance framework that we have in place, whether, like I said, it's very simple, or whether we've made it to be very complex and give us the guardrails that we need. This idea of content stewardship adds that layer of shared responsibility to every role. So whether it's the content manager or the web developer who sits in IT, whether it's a content strategist or a copy editor, each one of us is accountable and responsible to our roles when it comes to caring for the content. So that idea of being a steward and a content steward is just, it's an idea that I think makes the idea of governance not so scary, but just more, yeah, I can do this. I can help take care of our content in a way that protects the company and still helps our customers achieve what they need to achieve. So with that, I'm happy to open up the discussion.
And I will finish the recording with a quick thank you to Chris for everything that we've looked at so far. It's been really interesting.